the amphitheater-style classroom of the Galactic Strategy Academy on Zaria Prime hummed with the murmurs of 24 elite cadets. Commander Tazral's imposing figure stood at the center of the teaching pit, his blue-scaled skin shimmering under the holographic projections that surrounded him. The 4 eyes, characteristic of the Virak species, scanned the room with practiced precision. As we begin our 27th cycle of Advanced Fleet Strategy, his resonant voice boomed. I expect nothing but excellence from each of you. The Academy selects only the finest tactical minds from 17 stellar species. In the back row, partially obscured by the hulking frame of a Taurid cadet, sat Sarah Vale. Her slender form, just 1.7 meters tall with soft, exposed skin and only a patch of brown hair atop her head, made her conspicuous among the armored chitinous and scaled bodies of her classmates. She remained perfectly still, only her eyes moving as she observed the room. Tazral continued, Before we begin, I must address the diplomatic initiative that brings us a new addition. His upper eyes narrowed slightly. For the first time, a human from Earth will join our advanced tactics course. A ripple of whispers and subtle clicking sounds spread through the classroom. Sarah's expression remained neutral, though her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her datapad. Earth, Tazral pronounced the word with barely concealed disdain, is what we classify as a death world. Gravity 1.2 G, extreme climate variations, high radiation zones, and aggressive fauna. Despite these conditions, humans have only recently achieved interstellar travel capabilities. A Volurid cadet near the front row made a whistling sound that translated roughly to laughter. Commander, how can a species that barely understands 3-dimensional warfare grasp our 13-dimensional tactical simulations? An excellent question, Thrix. Tazral's scales flashed a brighter blue, indicating amusement. Admiral Venthor assures me that this experiment serves our diplomatic relations with the Earth government. I suggest we view it as an opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of established tactical doctrine. Sarah's gaze remained fixed forward, betraying nothing. Ms. Vale, Tazral suddenly called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. Perhaps you would care to introduce yourself to your esteemed colleagues. All eyes turned toward the human. Sarah rose slowly, her movements deliberate and economical. Sarah Vale, Earth, she said simply, her voice quieter than expected, but clear. I look forward to learning from Commander Tazral's expertise. She sat down without further elaboration. Tazral's lower left eye twitched slightly. He had expected either intimidated rambling or brash overconfidence, typical responses from inferior species thrust into advanced environments. The human's measured response was unexpected. Very well, he continued. Today we begin with asymmetric fleet engagement. The success of tactical maneuvers often depends on understanding your opponent's limitations more thoroughly than they understand their own. As Tazral activated the holographic display, 3-dimensional formations of ships materialized throughout the room. The cadets instinctively leaned forward, analyzing the configurations with practiced eyes. The chrono wedge formation. Tazral indicated a densely packed triangular array of capital ships. A classic approach for breaking defensive lines. Thrix, identify the inherent weaknesses. The Volurid cadet straightened proudly. 3 critical vulnerabilities. Commander, first, the concentrated energy signatures make it susceptible to area effect weapons. Second, the rigid formation limits adaptive responses to countermaneuvers. Third, the wedge creates blind spots in sensor coverage along the trailing edge. Correct, Tazral nodded. His gaze drifted toward the back row. Vale, do you have anything to add? Or is 13-dimensional tactics beyond your comprehension? The classroom fell silent. Sarah looked up from her notes. Time, she said. Tazral's scales darkened slightly. Elaborate. The chrono wedge's 4th vulnerability is time. Sarah continued evenly. The formation requires precise synchronization across all vessels. In regions with gravitational anomalies or temporal disruption, the lead elements arrive before their support, creating a fatal gap in the formation's integrity. The silence deepened. This weakness wasn't in the standard curriculum. It reflected advanced understanding of space-time dynamics in combat scenarios. That is technically accurate, Tazral conceded after a moment, though hardly relevant in standard engagement scenarios. Unless fighting near a neutron star pair or manufactured gravity wells, Sarah added, her eyes returning to her notes. Tazral's assistant, Backstraw, a younger Virak with lighter blue scales, glanced up from his monitoring station with visible surprise. The commander quickly redirected the class to the next formation, but his upper right eye remained fixed on Sarah for the remainder of the session. 4 weeks passed in the relentless rhythm of the academy. Each day, 24 cadets filed into the strategic amphitheater, absorbed complex tactical theories, and participated in small-scale simulations. The majority used neural enhancers to process the multidimensional scenarios, all except Sarah Vale. True to initial expectations, Sarah struggled with elementary three-dimensional maneuvers. During the first simulation exercise, her fleet was decimated within minutes, unable to coordinate effectively across multiple planes of engagement. Tazral made no effort to hide his satisfaction. Perhaps Admiral Venthor's diplomatic initiative requires reconsideration, he remarked loudly enough for the entire class to hear. Yet, something unusual began to emerge. While Sarah's practical execution remained poor, her theoretical questions demonstrated unexpected insight. She began spending hours in the Academy library, accessing archives on gravitational field manipulation and space-time matrices. Her requests for additional simulation time were frequent, though conducted in private. Backstraw noticed the pattern first. "Commander," he reported during their weekly assessment meeting, "Vale has been running hundreds of micro-simulations focused on gravitational response patterns. Searching for shortcuts, no doubt," Tazral dismissed. "The desperate strategy of the unprepared." "Perhaps," Backstraw hesitated, "but she's developed a novel algorithm for predicting defensive response lag in gravity-disrupted environments. I took the liberty of forwarding her work to the Alliance Defense Committee for review." Tazral's scales flashed with annoyance. "You overstepped, Backstraw. She's merely applying Earth physics to established principles. Nothing revolutionary." "The committee disagrees, sir. They've requested her full research notes." Tazral fell silent, his 4 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns, a sign of deep Virak contemplation. In the classroom, the pattern continued. Sarah rarely volunteered information, but when called upon, her answers were precisely targeted, often revealing unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated tactical principles. The other cadets began watching her with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Gorn, a muscular Taurid cadet who had initially been among the most vocal skeptics, found himself seated beside Sarah during a theoretical exercise on siege warfare. "Your species has never conducted a successful planetary siege," he stated bluntly, mandibles clicking. "Why bother with these exercises?" Sarah glanced at his work. "Your approach assumes unlimited resources and time. Most sieges fail not because of tactical errors, but resource depletion. On Earth, we studied ancient sieges where the attackers starved before the defenders." Gorn's compound eyes shifted. "That's actually the conclusion I was reaching," he paused. "Did Deathworld conditions teach humans resource efficiency?" "Survival teaches efficiency," Sarah replied simply, returning to her own work. By the 6th week, the class dynamics had subtly shifted. While still an outsider, Sarah had earned a measure of reluctant respect. Her continuing struggles with practical simulations remained a source of amusement, but her theoretical insights could no longer be dismissed. Then came the announcement that would change everything. "Your final examination, Tazral declared, standing before a massive holographic display of a heavily fortified space station. Will be a full-scale fleet simulation spanning 3 consecutive days. Each of you will command independent forces against the Tazral persona, an AI extension of my own tactical approach. Your objective is simple: capture the fortified station while minimizing both civilian casualties and military losses. A collective tension filled the room. The Tazral persona was legendary throughout the Academy. In 27 cycles, no cadet had ever defeated it. The simulation begins at dawn. I suggest you prepare thoroughly. This will determine your future in the Alliance fleet. As the cadets filed out, already forming strategy groups and arguing approaches, Sarah remained seated, studying the holographic station with unnerving intensity. Vale. Tazral approached after the others had left. Do you comprehend the magnitude of this challenge? This isn't Earth tactics with its primitive orbital defenses. Sarah looked up. For the first time, something like emotion flickered across her face. Not fear, but calculation. I understand completely, Commander, she replied. Thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate what I've learned. Tazral's scales darkened with suspicion. Your performance in practical simulations has been consistently inadequate. What makes you think the final examination will be different? Sarah gathered her materials unhurriedly. The previous simulations tested established tactics. This one tests adaptation. She paused at the door. Deathworlders excel at adaptation, Commander. The first day of the final examination arrived with palpable tension. 24 individual simulation pods arranged in a circle, each containing a cadet interfacing with a complete fleet tactical system. At the center, Tazral and Baxtral monitored all engagements simultaneously through a master control interface. All systems operational, Baxtral confirmed. The Tazral persona is running at full capacity. Simulation parameters locked. Begin, Tazral commanded. 24 virtual fleets materialized across the simulated space, each taking unique approach vectors toward the fortified station. Within minutes, the tactical diversity became apparent. Thrix deployed a classic swarm strategy, overwhelming outer defenses with sheer numbers. Gorn implemented a hammer and anvil approach, attempting to crush station defenses between 2 force concentrations. Others attempted various stealth and misdirection tactics. All except one. Commander, Baxtral's voice held confusion. Vale's fleet is maintaining position at maximum sensor range. No movement detected. Tazral's 4 eyes focused on the relevant display. Indeed, the humans' forces remained in a loose holding pattern, well outside the engagement zone. Vale. He activated the direct communication channel to her pod. Is your interface malfunctioning? No, Commander, came the calm reply. I'm observing. This is a combat simulation, not an observation exercise, Tazral said sharply. Combat begins with observation, Sarah responded. I'm gathering data. Tazral cut the connection with a gesture of irritation. Let her waste her opportunity. Focus on the actual engagements. And engagements there were... The Tazral persona responded with devastating efficiency to each approach. Swarm tactics were met with precisely calculated area weapons that decimated Thrix's numerical advantage. Gorn's hammer and anvil collapsed when the anvil force was isolated and systematically eliminated. By midday, 8 cadets had been completely eliminated, their virtual fleets reduced to debris. Throughout it all, Sarah's forces remained motionless, passive observers to the destruction. Should we consider her withdrawn from the exercise? Baxtral inquired, as the first day's session approached its conclusion. No. Tazral's scales had darkened to a deep blue of concentration. She's planning something. Let her continue her observation. The second day began with the remaining 16 cadets, implementing revised strategies based on their first-day experiences. More cautious approaches predominated, with emphasis on probing attacks and defensive positioning. Sarah's fleet finally moved, but not toward the objective. Instead, her forces dispersed into 48 smaller units, each executing seemingly random micro-jumps throughout the outer engagement zone. None approached within weapons range of the station defenses. "What is she doing?" Tazral muttered, watching the erratic movement patterns. "This isn't a recognized formation or strategy." Baxtral analyzed the data streams. "The micro-jumps appear to follow some pattern, but it's not one in our tactical database." "Wait," he paused, reconfiguring his display. "Commander, she's mapping response patterns." "Explain," Tazral demanded. "Each jump triggers defensive sensors. She's cataloging the response times, creating a comprehensive map of the defense network's reaction parameters." Tazral's scales flickered with reluctant admiration. "Clever, but ultimately futile. The persona adapts to pattern recognition attempts." Throughout the second day, Sarah's fleet continued its peculiar dance at the periphery, while other cadets engaged in increasingly desperate assaults. 4 more were eliminated completely. By day's end, only Gorn, Thrix, Jipik, a cunning Frisian cadet, and Marvix, a female Taurid known for her aggressive tactics, maintained viable forces alongside Sarah. "She's wasted 2/3 of the examination period," Tazral noted as the day concluded. "Whatever she's planning, she has only 1 day remaining to execute it." The third day dawned with tension thick in the simulation chamber. The 4 conventional combatants consolidated their remaining forces for final, desperate assaults. Sarah's fleet, meanwhile, finally began to move with purpose. Her 48 units, which had been scattered across the outer engagement zone, suddenly organized into 24 paired clusters. Each pair positioned itself at precise coordinates relative to the station and its defensive grid. "Commander," Baxtral's voice held urgency, "she's aligning her forces along gravitational fold lines." "Impossible," Tazral dismissed. "The simulation doesn't model 13-dimensional gravitational matrices with that level of precision." "It approximates them," Baxtral countered, "and she's found the approximation parameters." Before Tazral could respond, Sarah's fleet sprang into action. All 24 clusters executed synchronized microjumps, each following precisely calculated trajectories that intersected at quantum resonance points throughout the defensive grid. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the defenders. The simulated sensors began reporting phantom contacts. Defensive fire scattered in all directions, targeting non-existent threats. Communications between defensive platforms dissolved into cascading error messages. "What's happening?" Tazral demanded, his scales paling to a light blue of alarm. "Gravitational resonance cascade," Baxtral whispered, his eyes wide. "She's weaponized the simulation's own physics model." In the midst of the defensive chaos, Sarah's main fleet, which had been hidden within one of the dispersed clusters, suddenly converged on the station in a perfect spearhead formation. They encountered no resistance. The defensive grid was fully occupied with ghost targets generated by the gravitational disruption. The remaining cadets watched in confusion as their own assaults met fierce resistance, while Sarah's forces slipped through untouched. Jipik, demonstrating the adaptability of the Frisian mind, quickly adjusted his approach to follow in Sarah's wake, benefiting from the disruption she had created. "This isn't a recognized tactic," Tazral protested, watching as Sarah's forces systematically secured key points throughout the station without firing a single shot. "She's exploiting a simulation loophole." "No, Commander," Baxtral corrected quietly. "She's applying advanced gravitational field theory to tactical applications. The loophole exists in actual space-time. She merely found its reflection in our simulation." Within minutes, the station's command center registered complete capture. Sarah's forces had secured every strategic point without a single casualty, civilian or military. The Tazral persona, for the first time in 27 cycles, had been utterly defeated. The simulation chamber fell silent as the final results displayed on the main screen. Sarah Vale, 100% station. Capture civilian casualties. 0 military losses. 0 defensive systems. Integrity. 12%. Tazral stood motionless, all 4 eyes fixed on the impossible statistics. Around the chamber, simulation pods opened as stunned cadets emerged, their expressions ranging from bewilderment to outright resentment. Sarah was the last to exit her pod, her movements as measured as always. She approached the central platform where Tazral stood. "An interesting approach," the commander finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you, Commander," Sarah replied. "I observed that conventional assaults consistently failed against your defensive algorithms. An unconventional approach seemed logical." "You didn't fire a single shot," Tazral noted. "The objective was station capture with minimal casualties," Sarah pointed out. "Combat was not specified as a requirement." Backstrahl approached, holding a data analysis tablet. "Commander, preliminary analysis indicates that Cadet Vale calculated all micro-jump trajectories and gravitational resonance points manually, using only organic computing resources. The pattern complexity exceeds our standard neural enhancement capabilities." Tazral's scales shifted through several shades of blue as he processed this information. "That's not possible for human cognitive abilities." "With respect, Commander," Sarah said quietly, "humans evolved on a death world where recognizing subtle environmental patterns meant survival. We may lack your technological integration, but our pattern recognition capabilities are quite developed." The implications hung in the air between them. A species considered barely worthy of inclusion in the Academy had just revolutionized space combat tactics, using principles that the Alliance's finest minds had overlooked. 3 days later, the Academy's Board of Governors convened an emergency session. Rumors had spread rapidly throughout the campus. A human cadet had defeated the undefeatable Tazral persona using tactics that violated conventional understanding of space warfare. Sarah stood before the assembled governors, her posture relaxed but attentive. Beside her, surprisingly, stood Commander Tazral. "The allegations of simulation tampering are unfounded," Tazral stated firmly. "Cadet Vale exploited no unauthorized access or code manipulation. She simply understood the physics of the simulation better than its designers did." Governor Lentrix, a veteran of the Cordillean conflicts, leaned forward. "This gravitational resonance cascade technique, could it be applied in actual combat?" "Not only could it be applied," Sarah answered, "but its effectiveness would likely be enhanced. The simulation constrains gravitational interactions for computational efficiency. In real space, the cascade effect would propagate more extensively." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The implications were simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. A completely new domain of tactical warfare had been discovered by a cadet from a species considered barely space-capable. "This poses significant security concerns," Governor Kelsoth argued. "If knowledge of this technique spreads—" "It already has," Tazral interrupted. "Every cadet in my class witnessed its effectiveness. We cannot suppress this discovery. We can only ensure the Alliance maintains the leading edge in its development." After hours of debate, the decision was reached. A new research initiative would be established, the Interstellar Gravitational Tactics Research Unit, with Sarah Vale appointed as its director and Commander Tazral as senior advisor. The objective: develop and expand upon the revolutionary approach to space warfare that had emerged from an unexpected source. 2 cycles later, the Joint Interstellar Tactical Innovation Command, GITIC, held its inaugural meeting in a secure facility orbiting Zaria Prime. Representatives from 17 species gathered to witness the formal presentation of what was now being called Vale Doctrine, a comprehensive approach to utilizing gravitational field manipulation in both offensive and defensive operations. As the assembled dignitaries dispersed following the presentation, Tazral approached Sarah in the observation lounge, overlooking the swirling blue-green atmosphere of Zaria Prime. "A question has been bothering me for 2 cycles," he admitted, his scales now a peaceful shade of azure that indicated comfort and respect. "Why didn't you attack on the first day? You clearly had developed a theory already." Sarah smiled slightly. "I needed complete response data from the defensive network. But more importantly, I wanted to give my fellow cadets the opportunity to succeed on their own terms. It seemed respectful of their tactical traditions." Tazral's scales shifted to a contemplative purple. "Humans are more complex than we initially assessed. You're not merely clever predators. You possess empathy and respect for different approaches. Survival on a death world requires both innovation and cooperation," Sarah replied. "We learned long ago that the strongest predator isn't always the one with the sharpest claws, but often the one who understands the entire ecosystem." They stood in companionable silence, watching as a weather pattern formed on the planet below, a swirling vortex of clouds, not unlike the gravitational disruptions that had changed the course of Alliance tactical doctrine. "New threats are emerging on the galactic rim," Tazral finally said. "Unknown civilizations with technologies we've never encountered. The Alliance will need every tactical advantage. And now we have one more," Sarah finished. "Not just a new weapon, but a new perspective." Tazral's scales deepened to a rich indigo as he extended a 4-fingered hand. Sarah took it without hesitation, the contrast between his armored digits and her soft skin embodying the unlikely partnership that would reshape interstellar warfare. "Two different perspectives," Tazral said. "And the strength they bring when combined," Sarah completed. Below them, the storm on Zaria Prime coalesced into a perfect spiral, channeling chaotic energies into a single, unified pattern, much like the future they would build together. The chamber doors slid open behind them, revealing Baxtral alongside Jipik, Gorn, and several other former cadets now assigned to JIDIC. "The Rimward Defense Committee has requested an urgent briefing on gravitational disruption countermeasures," Baxtral announced. "They've detected unusual spatial anomalies near the Kethric expanse." Sarah and Tazral exchanged a glance. Their work was just beginning. "Assemble the tactical team," Sarah directed. "We'll start with a complete gravitational survey of the affected sectors." As the group moved purposefully toward the command center, Tazral reflected on how quickly things had changed. The Deathworlder girl who had sat quietly in his strategy class had not only outsmarted their entire fleet, but had also transformed their understanding of warfare itself. And perhaps, most importantly, she had taught a veteran commander that wisdom could come from the most unexpected sources, even a fragile-looking human from a harsh, distant world called Earth.